surveying the cove. 4 staff that will be surveying the cove, plus myself, about 4 days, 4 mornings a week, weather permitting. As they find plants that are invasive, they mark them with one of our buoys, which is that photo up in the upper left-hand corner. So all those plants get marked. They get, we take the GPS coordinates so that we can, like that map that I showed you before, that was all the GPS coordinates that we'd taken from the plants. And then we have a diver who will come out and remove those plants every week or 2, depending on how often we need him. So the first removal, which is, most of these pictures that you're seeing were last week, which was the first time that we removed the plants. The one in the bottom, picture in the bottom right, that is all of the plants that were removed so far. So we got most of them. Removing milfoil by hand, it's not perfect. And as soon as you start removing plants, things get muddy and it can get hard to see what you're doing. So there were a few that were missed that our staff caught the next day. So we're going to actually tomorrow, Friday at 5:30 p.m. weather permitting, the diver's coming back. So we're going to remove the rest, and our staff have also found some new other plants that they hadn't previously found before the removal. So the divers go down, they're digging them out carefully by hand. They're putting the plants in that bag that you see. The bag gets brought up to the surface. We paddle it over either to the boat or to the dock. We very carefully dump all the plants out, getting every tiny little fragment of milfoil that's in that net. And then the net goes back in and they get more. So it's kind of a tedious process, but that is what we're doing for the removal work. And just to cover a couple of questions that have already come up with various people, would we use benthic barriers or the big mats that can be put on the bottom to just kill everything? No, we don't use those because that kills everything. And these plants are, for the most part, like individual plants that are scattered throughout this cove. So it's not a huge patch that we could just kill all at once. So we're not using the benthic mats. That wouldn't be effective because it would open up this bare lake bottom for the invasives to really come in and outcompete the natives. So we don't want to do that. Herbicides are not an option for this year. The DP is really looking for to see how the manual removal works. Herbicides have only been used a couple of times on lakes in Maine, but there is a possibility that if things don't go well this season and we can't stay ahead of it, that herbicides might be a possibility for next year. We're also looking at getting some signs put in the cove on some new buoys. There's a bit of a holdup with the availability of the navigational aids program. They're the ones who can come out and actually put the buoys in the water. So it's going to be several weeks before those signs can be installed, but that's our hope, to put some signs around. We're also tomorrow, I'm going to be working with the DEP in the cove to take a look at things and considering whether or not it's time to expand the surface use restriction. Since, as you saw earlier, it doesn't really match up really well with those plants. And the problem is if they're in areas where there are plants growing and the plants are disturbed by a prop or even a paddle, they're pretty fragile plants, then they can break off and put away and start new plants in other places. So it really is, we really want to try to keep people out of that end of the cove, not just the surface use restriction, but really the whole end of the cove. So we're hoping to have more of a game warden presence in the cove. I've talked with the game warden last week, and the warden who lives in Leeds is planning to spend some more time to keep people out of that area. I have had experiences myself over the last couple of weeks with fishermen who didn't want to hear what I had to say, who were in the restricted area, who wouldn't leave, yelled at me. That's happened to me a couple times, and it's happened to other people a couple times as well. So so that has I think the surface use restriction is keeping a lot of people out, but it's for sure not keeping everybody out. So hoping that the warden presence there will help with that.
Heidi, can
but
I interrupt for just a second? I apologize.
Yeah.
I just got a text message from someone in the other meeting, and I can't go there because if I do, it'll close this meeting. Could I ask somebody to rejoin the other meeting quickly and let them know what the link is if they don't have it? I sent the link to the ALEC mailing list, but people might not completely know that. Do I have Ben? Could you do that? Ben's my nephew. Could you go to the incorrect link and see if you can post the correct link in the chat to people?
Yeah.
Buddy, I was just there and everybody was going to get off because we weren't in the right link. So hopefully they'll look at their email. Yeah, my email popped up with the correct link. So hopefully that will happen.
We've got 31 participants
there were 12
now
of
too,
us.
so.
Yeah, that was Jim Brazil and Karen Webster got it. We're on with you now.
Okay. So sorry, everybody. Sorry, Lighty.
That's okay. I knew we were a little crunched on time, so I was trying to talk really fast and get a bunch of stuff in there. So I think I've probably
move towards me. You just kind of scoot.
can I just remind everyone just to mute themselves so we don't have background noise, please? Thank you. So I think but yeah, Buddy's here. So I think probably I've shared all that I need to share for the time being, and would open it up to any questions that people have.
So let me quickly say too that this meeting is being recorded, and I will send out the link to the recording so that people can see what happened at the beginning. Although I didn't start the recording on time either, but I think you'll get it. So anyway, you will be able to see the beginning of the meeting when I send out the recording.
Okay.
And for those of you who responded to the paper flyer but are not on the mailing list, there is information at the bottom of the paper flyer that tells you how to join the mailing list. Join it soon so that you'll get the link to the recording.
And someone asked for the main, for the warden's number. So it's what you would do is you would call the main warden service dispatch. I'm going to find that number real quick. And then so Androscoggin is covered by a warden who's in Androscoggin County and also one who is in Kennebec County. So, one or the other of them would report to us. So let me copy that. I just posted the number for the warden. So if you see someone in the restricted area and you're close enough and you can get a picture of them and you can get their registration, that's helpful. Even, if you can take a picture of them, that might be enough. If you're close enough to get the registration, that's even better. But
I just want to say thank you. And is there anything else we can do?
So if you see, if you are in the cove and you see a plant that's not being marked by a buoy, and if you're one of the trained volunteers who has a buoy, you can mark that plant and let us know about it. And so we can go check it out and confirm it. When you're marking a plant with a buoy, try to be careful to get it's tricky to do, but try to not have the anchor right on top of the plant because that can break it up a little bit. So try to get the anchor next, right beside it. That would be ideal. So if you have something, like that, I know I see a lot of the volunteers here who we distributed buoys to last year. So that's helpful if you can do that. And then you can let us know and we can go check it out. Or if you're out there, we're out there Monday through Friday, weather depending. If you see our staff out there, you can also let them know about it if you're somebody who's in the Cove.
Heidi, I also posted my phone number in the chat. People can call. Let me make sure it's correct since I messed everything else up tonight. And it is correct. So my phone number is in the chat. People can also contact me, take some pictures, especially that give us a point of reference. Yeah, you can contact me. If you want to have pictures of that you want to send on to the game warden, you can either contact the 800 number that Leidy posted, or again, you can contact me.
Something else that you can do if you feel comfortable doing this and you're out there, nearby, if you're in the Cove or you're in your boat or whatever, and you see someone who's in that area, I'm hoping that there are people who go in the restricted area and just don't know what they're doing. And not that they're clear, like knowingly violating the surface use restriction, but they're just kind of clueless. And if you explain to them what's going on, would gladly leave the area. So I'm hoping that's the case with most people. So just spreading the word to other people that you know around and letting them know, these plants are not, they're not paying any attention to this boundary that we've set up with these buoys, and they're going beyond that. So it's really important to stay as far away from that area as possible. If you live in the Cove, to be very careful, keeping your eyes out for anything that looks different or suspicious, and trying to do your boating activity away from the end of the Cove as much as possible.
So Leidy, let's take a couple questions from the chat. Chat's actually a really good way to ask your questions because there are now 36 people on the meeting. Rich Tatum says, back around Memorial Day, I saw a marker close to the channel going to the main lake. Was there milfoil there?
No, there wasn't, nothing that we put there. I don't know what that was, but it wasn't any milfoil.
Todd Perkins asks, when do you expect lab results from the new spots?
I hope within a couple of weeks.
Todd Perkins also asks, if it is spread to the other side of the Cove, how would tactics change?
Well, yeah, so like I said, we're considering whether or not we need to expand the restricted area. Because it's not, and so if it's over on that other side, and there's a possibility that we would need to close off more of the Cove. That's what I'm going to take a look at with the DEP tomorrow. I think maybe they would, if we could see that it has spread quite a bit, I think maybe it would move up on the priority list a little bit for them. A lot of it is to see how things, as I said, we'll assess at the end of the season, with the DEP to make a plan for next year. So if we're seeing it that far away, it also is going to influence the priorities that we have when we're surveying, so that we're already surveying that whole end of the Cove anyway, but probably we're paying a little bit closer attention to the areas where we have seen plants, but we'll need to make sure that we're keeping just as close an eye on all these other areas as well.
So iPad to everyone says, how can I volunteer? First of all, who's iPad? Unmute yourself and let me know who you are.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm Amanda. I'm at 103 Lakeshore Drive. I'm not good at this stuff. I barely made it on.
Okay. So what you can do is call me.
Okay.
My phone number's in the chat, 207-320-5720. So we are using paid staff to monitor the inner Cove where the known milfoil infestation is, but we are still using volunteers in our Eyes in the Water team to monitor the rest of the lake. And so, because we need to make sure that it hasn't spread elsewhere. So if you want to volunteer, as a plant patroller, or we have other volunteer opportunities that I can talk about for people who want to call me. I can tell you what those are. And also, if you're interested in volunteering for Eyes in the Water, call me soon, because we're having our plant patrol team, we're having a kickoff meeting at my house on Saturday. Which is why I wasn't, so.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
And hi, Amanda. I'm one of the ones that left you the ALIC newsletter a couple of weeks ago.
Cindy,
and Luann, hi, Luann, your next door neighbor, is also a great resource.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We're not here full time, but I would like to participate as much as I can for the health of the lake. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would say, in our experience last week, depending on how the removal goes and how many people we need, there may be times when an extra person could be helpful, on the water, keeping an eye out for the diver for safety. So if any of you are interested in joining us, typically we're expecting we'll be doing the removal really early in the morning, like a lot of Friday mornings starting at 6:30 a.m. But if any of you are available to give a hand with that, you can let me know. And there were some other questions in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah, let me just make a plug for this. I just got back from the printer, and our new newsletter is now, thanks to in large part to Janet Barnhart's, our new newsletter is now printed. And if you're a member of ALEC, you'll be receiving a copy in your mailbox soon. And if you're not a member of ALEC, you'll be able to find this probably in a week or two in the town office, the general store, and other locations around town. In the back of the newsletter, it tells you how there are a lot of articles in here about the milfoil issues, the algal bloom, and everything else. There's a form in the back that allows you to contribute or to become a member of ALEC, to the Lake Association. And there's also an option for contributing to a campaign that we have to further battle all the stuff. So look for the newsletter if you want more information about joining.
So just to answer a couple other questions.
The next question is from Bob. Can the area be roped off? Can we put some plastic as a wall from the surface to the bottom?
So I don't think the plastic wall is something that would be used. I've been asking the DEP if we could put like kind of what you would, like a swim buoy line, like that you would see. And the DEP is checking with the navigational aids. Like we can't, like legally, we're not allowed to go out and do that. But he's checking with them to see if that's a possibility. He's concerned about, or the concern with that is that people could get their props tangled up. I'm not really very concerned about that. I'm much more concerned about people not understanding that they're supposed to stay out. So I'm really pushing for something like that to more clearly define the perimeter of the restricted area, but something like that may happen. Yeah.
Next question is from Rich Tatum. And I believe, because this pertains to his question, I believe the Tatums live farther up from where we have found milfoil. They live on West Acres, I believe. And he asks, how does the restricted area affect property owners within the area?
Yeah, so currently the restricted area, a big part of the reason, I mean, not that it was set the way that it was, and it's kind of got that funky shape, is that it wouldn't impact any landowners and their access. Surface use restrictions can be put in place and restrict anyone's access, including landowners. Legally, that can happen if it's necessary. Sometimes those restrictions can allow for certain types of use and not other types of use. Sometimes they can allow for a landowner to pass through a channel. So they're, you know, the goal, well, the goal of course is to keep the milfoil from spreading throughout the rest of the lake. Like that's very important, but it's also, another goal is to have as little impact on people's access as possible. So it's a balancing act.
So the next question is from Todd Perkins. Would they close the boat landing? And that's followed by, thank you, lady. We so appreciate your advocacy for our lake, and we do. So I will add to that. So his question, would they close the boat landing?
That it would take a lot for the boat launch to be closed. It would take a lot. That has happened in very few cases in the state of Maine. So whether you agree with it or not, the allowing people's access to the lake oftentimes seems to take priority over protecting the health of the lake. You might notice I have a little bit of an opinion on this, but that's just that is how the state operates with boat launches. So it's very rare for launches to be closed.
So Bruce M asks, could you repeat where the milfoil has been cited? Could you bring that slide up again? Because I know a lot of people missed.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we now have 40 people on the meeting, and
yeah, so okay, so I'll just run through these. They'll be really quick. So this was the plants that were found last year. All the green circles represent plants last year. The yellow are plants that we found this year. The line is the surface use restriction, really continuing to the cove, and then just combined the the green and the yellow together are the plants from last year and this year. So we are seeing a lot of regrowth in the same spots, especially in some of the areas where the plants were a bit denser, but also new areas and we do feel, you know, we wouldn't ever say that we were 100% confident, but we do feel fairly confident that up until the time of the algal bloom that we were surveying often enough, thoroughly enough, like spending so many hours out there and being pretty methodical about it. We don't feel that we missed a lot of plants last year, like up until the algal bloom. Did we get everything? Like, no, probably not. And it's very hard when the plants are small to see them, but we do feel
say a couple words about also why some of the plants grew so large because of our trouble finding them last fall, and why we had trouble finding them?
Yeah, and I did talk about that a little bit at the beginning, but I know there were some people who were not here. So we had to stop our removal work in like late August because of the algal bloom. So it was both unsafe for the divers, you know, potentially unsafe for the divers, and we had really poor visibility. So we couldn't see the plants. We did find, I was out with a few volunteers in September, and I did find a plant that I was really hoping we could get removed, and we couldn't. We didn't get it removed last year. So so the plants had longer to grow than we would have liked. And it probably didn't help that it was really warm in May. I think that probably contributed to some growth. So the woman from the DEP who did the diving last year and who trained our diver last week, she feels that the plants that she was removing were more, I think she said, more robust this year. So they were some of them were pretty good size. They were almost to the surface, and we were seeing them in water that was up to 4 feet deep, probably 4 or 5 feet deep.
So Jim Brazil asks, is the Cobby launch closed? And Jim, I assume you mean the dock in front of Cobby's Corner store. Is that right? Or you don't mean the launch on Lake Cobbessy? Is that right, Jim?
That's correct, buddy. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so at this point, no, there are no docks that have restricted access. But we will be, we're going to be talking with them. I'm not sure if any of them are on the call today, but we are going to be talking with them about that. And that, some of you may know that dock gets used by people from across the lake to access Cobby's store. So it is very concerning that that's an area where we've now found quite a few plants and they're very close to their dock. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we remove those plants as soon as possible so that they're not near the surface, that they can't be broken up by a prop.
And Martha Hodnott asks, is there any way to expand the restricted area buoys?
Yes, we can't move, well, even if we physically could move the buoys, like we can't just decide to expand the area. The surface use restriction boundary gets set by 2 agencies, the DEP and IF&W. So they together approve the restriction and then, would approve the expansion of it. And then, those buoys require, the anchors for those white buoys are so heavy that you cannot possibly do them without, their specialized equipment to lift it out of the water. The yellow buoys we can move, and we may move. We might even move some tomorrow when we're out there and take a look at things because they're smaller.
Leidy, do you have the photo handy of the new signs that we're hoping to affix to some of the buoys?
I could get it in a second. Yeah. Yeah, if you, do you while I look for it real quick, are there other questions that you can answer?
There are no other questions in the chat unless someone that I can see.
Leidy, it's Ted. Question for you. Are the wardens empowered to fine people who violate the surface use restriction? And do you have any idea of what the magnitude of the fines are?
I don't know what the size of the fine is. Actually, that's a good question. I can find that out and get back to you. And my experience with game wardens is that they typically would give a warning first. They don't immediately fine people unless they're a repeat offender or if they're really giving them a hard time like that. But all right, let me look for that.
So Leidy, while you're looking for that photo, let me make a plug for a couple of other things that we're doing. And that is Leidy and I are going to be speaking at the Wayne Presents Forum at the community church in Wayne. And we're, what are the dates again, Leidy? We're doing.
Yeah, so next Tuesday. And it's from 6:30 to 7:30. And then it's the 26th. It's the fourth Tuesday. Is it the third or the fourth Tuesday of the month? I just sent it out in our 30-mile newsletter that went out.
Yeah, and I'm going to send out. I'll send out email also. And the first one is going to be focused more on the algal bloom stuff and really a general forum on tips and tricks for property owners to curtail runoff from their property. The second one in July is going to be focused more on the problems facing Androscoggin Lake. In addition, everybody is welcome and encouraged to join our to come to the annual meeting. The Lake Association's annual meeting this year will be on August 6th. It starts at 10 a.m. at the Yacht Club. We'll have our business meeting and some presentations in the morning. We'll have a potluck at noon, and in the afternoon we'll talk more about what's going on with the lake and some of the programs that we're having. So please join us for the annual meeting as well. So back to Leidy.
Yeah, so I just shared a picture of what the signs will look like. And so I'm not sure how many of them we're going to get, and they have to be mounted on these big buoys and then installed by the Navigational Aids Program. So it's looking like 2 or 3 weeks at minimum before they would get any of these signs out there, but that's the plan.
Lighty, this is Jerry Tingley. I got 2 questions for you. So we're saying that if a boat had a prop and it ran into this restricted area, it could theoretically spread this milfoil throughout the lake, right?
Yes.
It's that easily spread.
Yeah, and it's not just the restricted area. Again, if somebody with a boat went onto that end of the cove where we're now finding quite a few plants that are outside of the restricted area, then
Right.
they could, spread it. And,
Right.
If this plant then if it spreads throughout the cove and gets near the boat launch, then you can just imagine like the amount of boat traffic, that would really be a bad thing.
Yeah, catastrophic. The other question I have, out of the other 50 lakes in Maine that have invasive plants, there must be, I think there's probably about 50. Have there been best practices to know what has worked for them as far as restricted areas and regulatory practices to prevent people from running into these restricted areas? Have we been able to collate how other lakes are doing this and what has worked for them?
Yeah, so a lot of restricted areas are not very common. Okay, they don't get used very often. So there aren't a lot of examples out there. Some of the examples are in areas where people don't boat a lot, so they haven't really been a big issue, or they're in areas where it's really clear and easy to like mark off the whole, kind of block off with the buoys, putting a line across the whole end of a cove or something. In this case, we've got buoys that are going out from the shore out into the middle of the lake and then across. And so it's not maybe as clear as it is on other lakes. So that makes this a little bit more challenging. Some lakes, they have paid the game wardens to have more staffing because they always have tight budgets. So they will hire game wardens just to get them out there, on the weekend to make sure the wardens are out there every day. And, maybe that's something that we do need to look at. Some lakes have had volunteers that have kind of stationed themselves out there around the restricted area to educate boaters, of course, not to enforce anything, but to try to educate people and to remind them to stay away. Our boat inspectors at the boat launch, one of their most important job beyond inspecting the boats, their most important job is to educate the boaters to stay out of that area. So that's something that we're doing. But there are a lot of people who come to that cove to fish from other parts of the lake who aren't launching at the boat launch, and we're not reaching them.
So the next question is from Todd Perkins. Are we tracking bass fishing events? And I can answer part of that. Yes, we are. We've been doing, the Lake Association has been doing so for several years. Before we had Milfoil, we just would call them and say, we're the Lake Association, we know that make sure they have courtesy boat inspections and try to establish a good relationship with them. By law, the bass fishing tournaments by state law are required to have, I believe, 2 courtesy boat inspections. Most of the bass fishing tournaments on our lake launch at Riverbend, and they are required to do their own bass fishing or their own courtesy boat inspections. The last 2 years, 30 Mile and ALEC have, 30 Mile's taken over most of it, but we have called them to let them know about the milfoil and where it is, and to ask bass fishermen to stay out of that area. And so far, they appear to have been very cooperative. The list of all tournaments and contacts is given on the IF&W website for the state of Maine. In addition, our newsletter publishes the list, but not the contact information. Contact information is on the website, though. We publish the list of all bass fishing tournaments as well, and at least at the date of publication. Lighty, I don't know if you have any more information to add to that.
No, just that, our boat inspection coordinator, Frank Chin, has already called all of the bass tournaments for this season, all the ones that are on the schedule, and made sure that they knew about the surface use restriction and asking them just to stay out of the cove, that end of the cove entirely. And, as they leave the boat launch to go left.
So Bob says, I'm reading an article about candlewood carp eating milfoil. Have you looked at that?
I don't know a lot about that. I haven't, that's not been used in Maine, that to my knowledge.
I would suspect too that candlewood carp are not, since they're not native to our lake, typically it's not good practice to introduce one invasive to control another.
Right.
Karen, is that you? Oh, okay.
No, that's me. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's tricky business.
iPad asks, I think that's Amanda. Sorry if I missed it. Is the boat launch restriction an option?
Highly unlikely and not at this time.
BID 27412 asks, would letters from concerned landowners help with state agencies? And there is some legislation that would help that Leidy might be able to talk about too.
Yeah, I think, letters from concerned landowners would certainly help. If there are landowners who are, that live in the cove, who say like, we will, we will gladly, or maybe not gladly, but we will willingly allow our access to be restricted, to expand the surface use restriction. If landowners in the cove were telling the DEP that, or telling me that, or I had letters or whatever, that would make a big difference to, because again, the agencies are reluctant to restrict people's access. That just makes it a lot harder. So if landowners are willing to participate, then I think that would be quite simple to expand the restricted area.
Yeah.
So, Leidy, what's the status of the legislation introduced by Tavis Hassenfuss?
Oh, the legislation that passed was to have an interagency working group that would report to the legislature on, the goal is to be able to do more work to prevent these invasive aquatic species, and to have a working group that's made up of the different agencies, but also groups like, private groups like lake associations and watershed associations.
Is there any other legislation in the pipeline that people can advocate for?
Not at this time. The year before, a group that I'm part of with other watershed organizations, we tried to get some clean, drain, dry, like legislation passed so that people were required to drain that would be against the law to not drain your live well. And it looked like it was going to pass, but in the end, the IF&W committee did not support it, because they didn't want more laws that they needed to enforce. That was what they said. It was just too hard to enforce. Our argument is that for those of us who hire, have boat inspection programs, we really wanted that law to pass because it gives more teeth. And when we talk to boaters and we tell them that they need to drain their live wells away from the lake, it's much more effective if we can tell them this is the law. Even if we're not able to issue a citation, we can tell them this is the law, and that matters to a lot of people who don't want to break the law. So we were really disappointed, and maybe we can bring that back around. But yeah, right now, it hasn't been too long since the last session ended, and all of us who are within this group that often introduces this legislation, or gets legislators to sponsor it. We're too busy doing our field work, so it'll be later in the season when we start working on the agenda for next year.
Leidy, it's Ted again. The area in the inner cove where Milfoil currently is not particularly heavily populated with camps. Is it possible to create a surface use restriction that has channels to allow the few landowners in there to get boats in and out?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to look at tomorrow morning with the DEP to see how we might be able to make that work. And he's got experience. I'm going out with John McFedrin, who's the head of the invasive aquatic species program in Maine for the DEP, and he's got experience working with other lakes and other surface use restrictions. So we're going to look at that together tomorrow morning. So yeah, it's possible. It's a little tricky. It's a little tricky with cobbies because there's been quite a bit of it, and it's like they're on not just in front of their dock, but then off to the side of their dock, and so there is potentially a channel, but would that channel remain free of plants all season? I don't know.
Next question. Can we research game warden pricing to keep boats away from milfoil areas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we will look into that.
Next is just a comment. I believe there was a bass tournament last Sunday in the rain. And so I'm looking in the newsletter, which you'll receive soon. And yes, on page 5, it says there was a bass tournament on the 19th with Maine Bass Nation. And there was a bass tournament today with Saco Valley cast members. And I actually saw 2 bass fishermen, unfortunately, in the restricted areas. So I'm wondering if maybe they didn't listen to our message. I don't know, but maybe we should call them back. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So let me say this. It's the state does a little bit, but we're doing 30 Mile and ALEC are doing a lot of this work. 30 Mile has a lot of paid staff that is doing this work. Leidy is paid staff. ALEC is all volunteer. 30 Mile River Watershed Association is not volunteer. They're paid employees. And we have a campaign called Save Androscoggin, which is designed to help combat the milfoil problem and to investigate some of the issues around the algal bloom last year. All of you, or I think probably all of you, because I recognize most of the names here, will be receiving, if you haven't already heard from us, we'll be receiving a letter in the mail very soon. We were just stamping envelopes today, so you'll be receiving a letter about that campaign. Your financial support is important because the state won't pay Leidy and 30 Mile to do this, and there's a price tag, a financial price tag. And so I don't know if Ted's the head of our fundraising committee for that campaign. I don't know if Ted or Leidy want to say a little bit more about that.
Thanks, buddy. It's Ted Tucci. So just very briefly, to all of you who are on this call, I know how much you care about the lake. When you hear from us about this fundraising campaign, think about what a clean and healthy Androscoggin Lake means to you. This problem is not going to get solved by the state. It's not going to get solved by the town. It's going to get solved by people who care about the lake and who are willing to contribute financially to all the initiatives we've been talking about, including the things that, all the great suggestions we've heard. The more people are willing to contribute to the campaign, the more tools we have in our arsenal to combat milfoil, to enforce the surface use restriction, and to figure out, why the lake turned green for 2 months last summer. So I'd ask you respectfully just to think about those things. And when you receive our communication, think about how generously you can give to the campaign, because it really affects your future ability to enjoy the lake and not your property values and future generations who hopefully can enjoy the same beauty and natural resources of the lake that we've enjoyed for so long. Thanks.
Heidi, do you have anything to add? There's one more question in the chat, or do you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
That's
All
good.
right. Carol asks, is there any restriction on swimming in the lake? So I assume that Carol's question probably applies, is about the surface area restriction with the milfoil, and I'll let Leidy answer that part of it. But if we have another algal bloom in the future, if the lake turns green, it's probably well advised to stay away from any, especially any green scum that you find. The increased algae or cyanotoxins can release toxins that are harmful to people, to pets. We had several reports of pets getting ill last summer. If you still draw your water from the lake, it's important to remember, if we're having an algal bloom, that boiling the water, well, it will kill bacteria. It actually increases toxins in the water. You do not want to boil the water and use it. You do not want to shower in the water, because toxins can be released in the air and you'll breathe them in. But Leidy, maybe you can also address the issue with milfoil, swimming in the restricted area or around milfoil, and if you have anything more to add about the algae.
Yeah, yeah, as far as swimming in the restricted area, that is not allowed. And I can tell you from my experience a few weeks ago, just snorkeling, because I'm not a scuba diver, but I got in the water, was snorkeling and trying to at least just remove, like break off the surface of some of the tops of the plants. And it's really easy to get tangled up and to disturb them. So if there's an area where there's a lot of plant growth, yeah, in the cove, I would recommend that you not swim in that area, because they're just, these plants are they're not that sturdy and they can be broken off pretty easily, and by a swipe or by a kick or something. So you got to be careful with swimming too.
Are there any other questions? Just one last plug for our volunteer team, especially plant patrollers. The milfoil was discovered by one of our plant patrollers, Catherine Mahoney, who's on the call. And so our volunteer team is important to this as well. We need to explore the rest of the lake. And let me also add, again, please join us on August 6th for our annual meeting. Check your email for other events coming up throughout the summer. We may have additional events like this. There are Wayne events. There's Wayne Presents also at the that we're going to be doing that we mentioned earlier. And the newsletter, you should be seeing the newsletter soon. If you're a member, you'll get a copy in your US mailbox. You will also, everybody who gets our email list will get an email regarding the newsletter. And there's a lot more information in there.
Yeah, and our 30-mile newsletter, we're sending that out. We send that out by email once a month, and we have. And the
30-mile website, by the way, has several great pages on Androscoggin Lake. We are in the process of updating the ALEC website, which is sadly out of date. It will have more information as well there once that's rolled out. And eventually it will also have the ability to renew your membership in ALEC with a credit card online. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook too. We're trying to
yes,
keep
I just saw that, Cynthia. Yeah. All right. I think
I'd like to make a comment, Buddy, from when I was, 30 Mile River has been really important to us on Parker Pond. Okay, they were able to get grants for us to help pollution sources around our lake. And when we found out about Androscoggin Lake, having trouble with with invasive plants, we went ahead and proposed doubling our contribution to 30 Mile River to $18,000 because we knew we wanted to make this work together with 30 Mile River and support their efforts in helping you folks out, just like we would want you guys to help us out if we had a problem. So we doubled up on our efforts and have been successful the last 2 years in doubling our monies, and we hope that it's benefiting the whole watershed. And I can't say enough about 30 Mile River in our efforts to keep our waters clean.
Thanks, Jerry.
I agree. 30 Mile, our lake would be in serious trouble without 30 Mile right now, because we can't do all this with just volunteers.
Yeah, thank you, Leidy. And 30 Mile, really exceptional. So important.
You're welcome. I won't say I'm glad to do it because I wish I weren't doing it. I wish this weren't a problem, but but it's what we're here for. So we want to help.
And Leidy, there are a bunch of thank yous in the chat. I'm going to try and save the chat before I close the meeting. It's saved. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting then, and we'll see you again this summer.
Absolutely.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Thank
Thanks,
you all.
Thanks
Bye.
for all your questions.